What is up, guys? Today we'll be comparing the 7 Pro to the S20 FE. So let's go ahead and get started. The 7 Pro you can actually find very cheap now, around the 500 to 550 price point. Even cheaper if you go on eBay and you want to do a bid. The S20 will cost you around 600 bucks depending on where you get it from. They have deals on certain carriers and stuff like that. I will put the links down below so you guys can check that out. So let's go ahead and get started with both of these phones. So around the same price range, or the 7 Pro is a little cheaper, and you have a much more premium design on the 7 Pro. Obviously Samsung decided to go with a plastic back on here, which does have its benefits, I guess. You know, if you drop this phone, it won't shatter as easily as glass. Of course, it has just more durability, I guess, but it definitely just doesn't feel as premium as a a glass and metal phone like the 7 Pro. You do not get a whole bunch of fingerprints on the S20, which is something that I really like. As you can see with most glass phones, depending on what color you get, you'll see a lot of fingerprints, but it's not a huge deal. The S20 actually feels just a little bit heavier, and it's a little bit thicker, I think. Yeah, it's a little bit thicker than the 7 Pro. But going around both devices, you have power button, volume rocker on the S20, and then you have a mute vibration switch on the 7 Pro. And then your volume rocker is on the left side on the 7 Pro. Down below, both of these phones are missing a headphone jack, so you do not have a headphone jack. Both phones do have stereo speakers on them, as well as USB Type-C. Alright, so when you turn both phones around, you will see the big difference immediately. So you have a full screen, no notch, no punch hole display on the 7 Pro. It houses the pop-up camera up here. On the S20, you have the little punch hole in the middle, and as you can see, just much thinner bezels on the 7 Pro. It gives you the feeling of just you're holding a screen in your hand. That's the feeling it gives you because you have the curved display. This is a flat display. Some people don't like the curved displays because of accidental touches. I completely understand that, but let's go ahead and talk about the display specs a little bit more. So on the S20 FE, you have a Super AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz, 6.5-inch display, 1080p, 407 for the PPI. On the 7 Pro, you have a little bit bigger display, 6.67-inch display. It's a 1440p display, 516 for the PPI, and it's a 90 Hz display. Both of these displays are HDR10 plus. So basically, I prefer the 7 Pro's display, even though this has a higher, refresh rate on the S20, 120 Hz versus 90 Hz. It's not a huge difference. Like, you won't be able to tell. I can tell a little bit, but it's not something that I would spend like the extra money on, unless you're just really into high refresh rates because you just like the look, or you're into gaming at 120 Hz. Otherwise, I wouldn't go too crazy about it. And also 1440p versus 1080p. Basically, you really notice the higher PPI since it's 407 versus 517. When you're looking at icons and stuff, it just looks really sharp and clear on the 7 Pro. Not that it doesn't look good on the S20, just not as good. And if you watch a 1440p video versus a 1080p video, let's just say you watch like a nature video or something like that, you will be able to notice the small little detail and stuff like that on both displays. But as far as color, both these displays look great. Brightness and everything looks excellent. So these are two really great displays. It really comes down to personal taste. Me personally, I still love the 7 Pro's display till this day. Both phones are running Android 10 with two different skins. So you have One UI 2.5, I believe, and then you have Oxygen OS 10. Both of these phones will get Android 11, of course. So basically, I think Oxygen OS is just super clean. I think it's the cleanest skin next to stock Android. And yeah, it's just really nice. Now, when you're just scrolling through both phones, it's really smooth since you have that high refresh rate. And Samsung does throw in a really cool feature like the Samsung Deck, so you can turn your phone into a desktop on your TV, or even on your desktop, of course. Secured folders is on here. This phone supports the wireless power share as well. And on Oxygen OS, it's just really simple. You have all your simple stuff, screen recording. You have Zen mode, a couple of customization options that I really like how they have it laid out on here. Like you can customize icon packs and all that stuff. Now that's pretty much standard on all Android phones, but it's nice that, you know, they have that UI for it, themes and stuff like that. So basically OnePlus or One UI just has a ton of little stuff like the split screen multitasking, shortcuts and stuff like that. So it's just got a lot of stuff in it, and the Oxygen OS skin is just super smooth. It rarely lags, and yeah, I just really love it. So it really comes down again to personal preference, whether you like One UI or not. Samsung has a lot of their applications as well, the Bixby stuff, so it really comes down to that. Now, before we get into the benchmarks, let's talk about the processor and specs real quick. So you have on the S20 FE, this is the Exynos model. It's Exynos 990, Mali G77, micro SD support, 128 gigs of storage and 6 gigs of RAM. On the 7 Pro, you have the Snapdragon 855 and Adreno 640. No micro SD support, which always disappointed me with this phone. It would be really nice to have expandable storage, but you just don't have it on here. 128 gigs of internal storage on the base model, which is really good, and 6 gigs of RAM as well. So again, both of these phones are lacking the headphone jack too. They both support NFC. You have a IP rating on the S20 FE. Now you can get this phone wet. You don't have an official IP rating, but you can get it wet. So I just wouldn't like submerge it in water. I wouldn't take the risk though. But let's go ahead and do just some mini little speed tests here. Go ahead and launch Subway Surfer. Now usually these Snapdragon processors are always going to be faster in benchmarks than the Exynos ones, and my 7 Pro has a ton of stuff on it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't win anything. Yeah. Open the Google Play Store. Yeah, so they're almost neck and neck. Let's go ahead and run the benchmark here. See what kind of scores we get. Now once we get to the graphics performance in PUBG, then we'll see what we get there. Alright, so here are the Geekbench scores. As you can see, the S20 beat it on the single core, but the OnePlus 7 Pro came out on top by a little bit on the multi-core score. So let's go ahead and launch PUBG so I can show you guys the difference in graphic performance and how gaming is going to look on both of these phones. Alright, so we're in PUBG on both. Let's go ahead and check out the graphics. As you can see on the S20 HDR Ultra, and we can do the UHD, the Ultra HD, excuse me, and then we can go up to extreme graphics on the OnePlus. So as you can see, big difference when it comes to gaming performance. We just have that slight more power on the 7 Pro here. So if you're really into gaming, I would go with the 7 Pro, mostly because I think the display is just really nice for gaming. 1440p, you got this full screen, so there's no interruption. Not that the Puncho is such a bad thing. I think it's the next best thing to this display, but yeah, so I just think the gaming experience is just really awesome on any full screen display, especially when it gives off this feeling that you're just holding a screen with really no bezels on the 7 Pro. So I just think that is super cool. Let's check out the speaker performance. Both have stereo speakers, both are maxed out. Start with the S20. Alright, so these two speakers almost sound identical in volume and in quality. I can barely tell the difference. The hi-hats sound a little bit louder, but it's just Yeah, I think the S20 is a little bit louder, but as far as quality and bass presence and all that stuff, it's pretty much the same. So it is slightly louder, but it's not by much. Alright, so both of these phones support NFC as well for mobile payments, which is something that I love. Both have Bluetooth 5.0, and they both have a in-display fingerprint scanner. And also they both have face unlock, which the face unlock is going to be faster on the S20, mostly because you don't have the pop-up camera. This has to pop up to unlock your face, which, you know, is not going to be super fast as the fingerprint scanner. Let's see which one seems faster. This one is always spot on. And OnePlus fingerprint scanner always feels instant to me. Like, it's really just a tap. You don't really have to hold it. It just feels like you have to hold this one slightly, but I can't really tell. So they both feel fast and the same speed. Yeah, it's really hard to tell. I think the 7 Pro might be slightly faster, but it's not by much. And then just might be the animation, honestly. So both are just extremely fast. Again, face unlock is going to be faster on here because the camera is already exposed. Alright, so let's talk about taking photos. So on the S20 FE, you have a 12 megapixel standard and 8 megapixel telephoto, 12 megapixel ultra wide. You get 4K 30 or 60 FPS. 32 megapixel selfie, 4K 30 or 60 FPS. On the 7 Pro, it's a 48 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel telephoto, 16 megapixel ultra wide, 4K 30 or 60 FPS. The pop-up camera is 16 megapixels, but that only shoots in 1080p. So basically, from these stills that you're seeing, both of these cameras are really like neck and neck to me. I tell people all the time, OnePlus has been slowly improving the camera with software updates, and that's why even though this phone is an older phone, it's able to keep up with the S20 FE. I just think the photos were a little bit more color accurate on the 7 Pro, but Samsung seems to like oversaturate a lot, like I say in all my videos, and that's just a look that Samsung fans like, so that's just their image processing. But as far as detail and overall quality of photos, I thought these two phones were really neck and neck, and I actually preferred the 7 Pro's color profile over the S20 FE, which was very interesting. And as far as video looks really good on both. The front-facing camera on the S20 FE will be able to shoot in 4K, unlike the 1080p one on the 7 Pro. So that does have its advantage if you're into vlogging and stuff like that. So when it comes down to image quality, again, both are neck and neck. I can't really say one over the other unless you just really like the punchy colors or you like the more realistic colors on the 7 Pro. But I really enjoy taking photos on both of these phones. Let's talk about the battery situation. So on the S20 FE, you have a 4,500 milliamp battery, 25 watt fast charging. Then you have fast wireless charging at 15 watts and reverse wireless charging. So I could charge a pair of headphones or another phone on the S20. On the 7 Pro, you have a 4,000 milliamp battery, so slightly smaller battery, but you have faster charging speeds, 30 watt compared to the 25 watt on the S20. So I really love that. This phone has no wireless charging and of course no reverse wireless charging. So if that's something that you're really into, obviously you want to go with the S20 FE. And for battery life, you can easily get through a day with both of these phones, no problem. I've never had a day where I was just completely out of juice on the 7 Pro. I've always been able to get through a day and go into the next day and not, really be scared of my phone dying. And that's the same thing on the S20 FE. Now, if you're on 5G on this phone, we don't have 5G where I live, so I'm not sure what kind of battery life you get. I'm assuming it's going to be much worse. You'll probably get around 5 to 6 hours if you're on 5G, so do note that. So which phone are you guys going with? Be sure to let me know. Catch you guys in the next one.